Hello everyone and welcome to another Flux tutorial. My name is Zach Peterson and today we're going to be discussing some of the best practices that you should follow when managing parts updates in your Flux projects. Now if you've opened up one of your projects, you've probably noticed that there is sometimes a little bar that appears at the bottom of your screen that informs you that updates to your parts are available. I'm going to go over some of the best practices that you should follow in order to ensure that you're always getting the right parts updates into your projects. Make sure to hop into Flux and follow along. Now, when you jump into one of your projects on the Flux platform, I think one of the cool things that you get notified about is when there are updates to the components that appear in your project. So you can see right down here in the lower left portion of my screen, as soon as I opened up this project, I get a notification right here. Updates are available for your components. So you can, of course, dismiss this if you want, but I think it's always a good idea to review this because sometimes you may have made some updates to your own components and those haven't been applied, or other users have made updates to components and it's a good idea to review these and see if you want to include these in your project. Now, obviously, if I'm looking through this list, I can see here that some of these are just generic components that have been updated, and then I have an integrated circuit that's been updated down here by user Adrian95. I can also just go over to the All tab and I can see everything or all the settings for all the different components in this project. And you can see right here that I have one of my own components in this project, and it's right here. It's the FJD5553TM. So this is a transistor, and it's actually Q1 in my schematics. So here you can see these updates, and I think this is really important because it illustrates some best practices when other users create updates to components and then push those updates into the public library. So one of the things that Jarwin has done here is for all of these updates, he has very nicely provided a detailed note for what exact changes were made to the component before they were pushed into the library. So if you're creating components and then you update these and push these into the library for other users to access and then include in their projects, I think one of the important best practices is, of course, to leave notes. So that's our first best practice. Leave notes for any of the updates that you apply so that other users know exactly what you did. So here, this one is pretty simple. Updated description and added the hashtag. I'm going to select this and then update the component. Here, just added hashtag, same thing. I'm going to update this component. Now, some of these other ones, like removed rogue footprint, I think that's fine too. I can update it. But these two don't have any notes on them. So I think it's important to go through and do a brief review of this component and make sure that nothing crazy is going on inside of that footprint or inside of that symbol. So you noticed here I just right clicked and hit open new tab. I could of course just click on it also. It'll automatically open in the new tab either way. But once you open up that component, you can then review the component directly and you can then verify what's happened or what's changed in the component before you update it in your own project. So this brings us to our second best practice is, of course, if there are no notes, you should then review these so that you are exactly sure of what is getting updated in your project. So here, once you open this up, you can then go into the change history. So that's one of the great things about the version control system is that I can actually look through this change history and see exactly what was changed in this component before I opt to add in the update. Now, if Jarwin is someone that I trust or someone that I'm collaborating with, and I know that Jarwin doesn't make mistakes in the component updates that he applies, I can always just select Receive Latest Drafts. So what that's going to do is it's always going to ensure that I receive the latest drafts for this specific component when it's updated by Jarwin. So I could do the same thing for, let's say, this component right here from Adrian95. I could always just select Receive Latest Drafts And whenever this is updated, I'm always going to receive the latest drafts as long as this is being done by somebody that I trust. So Adrian95 is the owner of this component. He has made it publicly available for everybody to use. When he applies updates, as long as I trust Adrian, I can then receive the latest drafts. So within this list, we've covered updates applied by other users on the Flux platform. And these could be other users that I know and that I collaborate with directly, or they could just be other users whose parts I've opted to include in my projects. Now, what about my own updates? You can see here that I have one of my own parts in here, and currently it is up to date. But what happens if I maybe make a change to that part? How should I handle those updates? Well, here I have this part open and I have made a change to it. And now what I'm going to do is publish this to the library. And I'm just going to leave a note, modified code for component. And I'm going to publish this. Now, once this is published, I can go back over to my project, hit refresh. It's going to take just a second to come up. But once it comes up, I'll then receive the warning down at the bottom of the screen again, stating that I have updates available for my components. So if I go in here to these component updates, this is the most recent set of updates that are available since I last opened the project. And you can see here it's my component, updated a few seconds ago, and you can see my note right here. Now, obviously, if I trust myself to update my own components, what should I do? Well, I should just click Receive Latest Drafts for this component. So now I'm always going to automatically apply any of those updates to my project here, and those are going to automatically import as soon as I open this project from the dashboard. Now, just because you can select this Receive Latest Drafts option, I would argue that it should probably be used in a limited number of cases, and there are some important reasons for that. So first of all, this is my component, and I might be using this in multiple projects. Now, if I have an error in this component, I may not notice it in this particular project. So there may be, let's say, a footprint error. And it may not create a problem in this project, but it could create a problem in all of my other projects. So I think sometimes an update to a component needs a bit more review before you just blindly accept all of those updates into your projects. So this is going to be applied on this basis for this project, and maybe that's fine for this project, but maybe it's not a good idea to do it for all the other projects. So same thing here with this update from Jarwin for this 1x4 connector. Here, it may not create a problem in this project, but it may create a problem in a different project. So I would argue that this should also be reviewed a bit more thoroughly before just selecting the Receive Latest Drafts option for every single project. So it might be best to leave these unchecked. So, should you always use it? Should you never use it? I think it depends. I think it's good to use it in a limited number of cases. For example here, with something like a ground symbol, it's probably just fine to receive the latest drafts because, frankly, this doesn't have a footprint associated with it and it's not going to create any risk in your schematic. But something else like, say, one of these components or like a complex integrated circuit, that might need a bit more review. So maybe it's not the best idea to always receive the latest drafts until that first initial update is, of course, thoroughly inspected and vetted in your project, and then you can consider selecting the Receive Latest Drafts option. Now, the last thing I'd like to note is really the importance of taking good notes when you make modifications to a component and then publish those changes to the library, especially if other users are going to be accessing that component. So just as an example, we looked at some updates to Q1 earlier in this video, and those updates were made to the code for Q1. However, if I go over here, I could make changes to the PCB or changes to the schematic. And I want to make sure that if I make a change to, let's say, the footprint, then I want to document specifically where that change happened in the footprint. So just as an example, let's say I want to add in like a circle here to indicate where the base terminal is. To make this smaller, I would just set the size design rule, add that, and then let's just say this is 0.5 millimeters, so it's a reasonably sized base pin indicator. Now you could use this as a pin 1 indicator for another integrated circuit as well. But let's say we put it right here. So if I go in to publish these changes, I want to be very clear that I added a base indicator to the silkscreen layer in the footprint, and then publish that. So now anybody that is using this part is going to see that very specific note in the list of updates, and they're going to be able to know exactly what to look for when they go and review this component. Or if they're fine with that update, they can just update the part in their own project. So now when I go back here into my original project, hit refresh, of course that change is going to import into my project because I already have the receive latest drafts enabled for my own parts in this project, and specifically for this part. So to summarize, as we've seen, whether or not you should apply parts updates automatically and how to manage and review these really depends on who you're collaborating with. If you're doing all of your own management of your own parts, and of course if you're only making them visible to yourself, then I think it's appropriate to always turn on receive the latest updates for all of your own parts. If you're working with a team, you should work that out with your team. And of course, if you trust the source of those parts updates from your team members, then you can always turn on the receive latest updates for those parts. For other public parts, I think it's good to just review at least the notes, and then of course reciprocate if you update parts that are available for other folks on the Flux platform to publicly use. You should make sure that you include thorough notes when you apply updates so that others know exactly what they need to review when they look at those part updates. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.